I didn't know I was going to be crying at 9 a.m., Felix.
Well, Cassie, so nice. Really so nice to see you again. I don't know if you've seen the other episodes on this podcast. There's three things that I'm really trying to do with these episodes. I want to know who you are, what you do, and how you can help people. So let's get right into it. Who are you?
Who am I? I am Cassie Adkins. There's no simple way to answer really who I am. It really depends on the environment that you catch me in. If you're in my front yard, I am a animal lover. I'm planting trees or bushes or picking weeds. At work, I am the helper, the giver. I guess if you ask my family, they would tell you the same thing, just in a different way. So I currently am a leadership coach in the executive space, and my passion really is helping founder CEOs be the complete package so that they can take their idea, their baby, and really have it be successful.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you obviously do some gardening. It sounds like but you also have that giving personality, which comes through with the coaching that you do now. But you haven't always been a coach. Obviously, that's not where you started. So let's get back in time. How did you get to be where you are today?
Sure. So actually, I went to Virginia Tech's architecture school, and sadly and unfortunately, one of my friends' dad passed away. And it was actually through the process of helping her grieve and mourn that I realized that I loved architecture, but I needed to help people. I had a gift of being able to meet people exactly where they were at, feel what they were feeling, and help them get to the other side of that. And I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. I just knew that despite, up until my 20 years or 21 years of knowing that I wanted to be an architect major, that wasn't my actual calling. And so I went right to the advisor and I switched to psychology and wanted to be an adolescent therapist. I was convinced. I mean, I loved the apparently I just love people that have, lots of needs is really what it boils down to, Felix. But I graduated college, started working in a group home for adolescent delinquent teenagers. Life happened. I found myself back in Virginia and doing in-home mental health therapy. My first client was methamphetamine addicted, and my supervisor at the time said, "Hey, you need to go work with this lady Shar that works here. She's our addictions therapist. She'll help you kind of figure out the best way to help your client." And I thought, "Oh, man, are you serious? Okay, fine." Right. So I begrudgingly went to Shar's office because I had heard some rumors that she was a little intense. Turns out we were two peas in a pod, and I absolutely fell in love with what she was doing. And she said, "You're going to be my next addictions intern." And I said, "No, no, 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 no. I'm not sure about all that." Well, it turns out I was in the throes of my own addiction. So you can imagine the hesitation to be an intern with an addictions therapist, right? I went dry for about a year to prove to her that I did not have the disease of addiction and that I had complete control over my drinking. And in that year of proving her wrong, she very much proved me right, Felix. So the version of me that had been drinking since I was 12 years old was gone, and I needed to now throw myself into the addicted population. And I did for a decade. I did my internship, got my state credentials, got my national credentials, worked my way through, did inpatient, outpatient, methadone to complete abstinence based, virtual during COVID. I ran Department of Corrections substance abuse program in the Tri-County area, built the clinical program for an inpatient facility. And then all of the deaths kept happening from COVID. I'm close enough to Baltimore, and the fentanyl was just killing everyone. And my husband came to me and said, Cassie, you need a break. Work from home for a few months, right? There's plenty of work from home jobs right now. Take a break emotionally and then go back to it. Somehow, by the grace of God and a Google search of work from home jobs in the middle of COVID, I found myself at a tech startup, which I didn't even know what a tech startup was at the time. And through my journey at the tech startup, I learned that I have an absolute affinity for founder CEOs and the struggles that they go through and that they face and the balancing act that they have to juggle on a day to day. And though I loved the emotional disconnect from the vicarious trauma of addiction therapy, I wasn't helping people develop themselves and getting through that hell that I had mentioned previously. And I knew I needed to go back to that because that's who I am at my core. So last summer I said, okay, I'm going to do this, and started the process of starting my own business. And I knew when it was time to think about who do I want to serve, I knew that it would be early stage tech founder CEOs because of the special place in my heart that they have.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a challenging journey to deal with. People that are addicted to a variety of substances, and you're right. Fentanyl definitely has changed that landscape in so many ways, so many bad ways, really. Just with the fentanyl that makes it even into other products that are out there that you don't even know sometimes contain fentanyl. So you think you're buying one pill and then you get fentanyl instead, and the problem with fentanyl is a tiny amount can go a very long way, and that makes, I mean, that's even on the healthcare side of things, right? Most every medication is measured in milligrams, but fentanyl is measured in micrograms. Even that tiny distinction has led to people receiving harm from fentanyl, even in a healthcare setting where people should know about this. So it's definitely a very dangerous drug
Yes.
that has many potential benefits if used correctly. But that's the problem with street pharmacists, is a lot of times they're not used correctly. They're not used to help people in a positive way. But I want to go back to something you said at the very beginning, which kind of intrigued me. You said you enjoyed architecture, and yet I heard nothing about architecture in the rest of your
Yes.
story. So what's that all about?
So I am currently upstairs in my house, and it is in a house that I designed. So when my husband and I got married, we knew one of the first things we wanted to do was buy a plot of property. So we found 12 acres that we absolutely fell in love with, and a couple years later built. Well, I mean, we didn't do the building, um, but we had built for us based on the plans and the design that I was able to draw and come up with. And so it's really neat to be in a custom home that I got to design, from the simple colors of the kitchen, but to the design of the kitchen and the size. And it's got the open to above and the balcony that I always wanted and all the windows I wanted. And it that has helped me kind of scratch that itch. I'd always told myself, okay, well, you're not an architect major, but you'll at least design the house you live and die in. And I did get to accomplish that, minus the passing away here, but I will have to be carried out of here, Felix. That's a promise.
That's awesome. The reason I was asking about that, when I finished high school, I really wanted to become a pilot, and I really haven't done much in that space at all. I did do the
Mm.
ground schooling, I did pass the written test, but I never had the opportunity to do the practicals. So I would need to resume all of that. So the reason I was asking about that was because that was something that always intrigued me, and yet it is something that I haven't really done to scratch that itch, if you will. But it's definitely something that still lingers in the back of my mind. So, is there something in for you where you're like, ah, man, I wish I would have gone a different route, or you're like, yeah, I'm perfectly fine just constructing this house that we live in now, and that's it, that's enough for me.
Yeah, that it is. It really scratched that itch. It really my life is so full, and I I really try to not live in a what could have been, should have been kind of world. And when I look out, my ducks are currently in my garden eating the weeds to prep it for the spring, and my chicks are out there, and my dog is over on the lounger on her pillow that she has created this like indent in because that's she sits there like Simba, right? And in Mufasa and looks out over her front yard all day long. And I can't think of anything more that I could want out of life.
That's beautiful. I love that. You're truly creating the life that you deserve, the life that you desire. That's beautiful. I mean, I think most people should live that way. Um, but then you also, in that same theme, if you will, you went out and you created that life for yourself, and yet you also work with people who have so much potential to do that for themselves, but decided to opt for some form of addiction instead, to avoid the hard truths, to avoid the hard work. What has that taught you? What can we all do to help those people out, or help change society's perspective on addictions, to make sure that there isn't so much untapped and unfulfilled potential out there in the world?
Well, Felix, depending on how long you want this podcast to be, the the short answer is that what I learned about the addicted population is that they truly are sick. We truly are sick. I am one of those in recovery, right? And no one no one chooses the life of addiction, Felix. Nobody just wakes up one day and says, "Man, how can I royally F up my life and destroy the lives around me by making the worst possible outward decisions that I could make?" Okay, no one makes that choice. Now, did I make the choice to take the first shot at a truth or dare game at 12 years old? Absolutely, Felix. That was 100% me and my own volition. But what happened at a chemical level in my brain at that point, I had no control over. Okay. The fireworks that went off, the purpose for living that I experienced the minute it hit my throat, my friend didn't experience that. We did the same thing. We both took a shot of Wild Turkey 101, right? Because that's what her mom had in the liquor cabinet. But our experiences were completely different. And it wasn't because I was a bad person. And it wasn't because she was a good person. And it wasn't because of anything except the genetics. The disease of addiction lived in me and became alive in me that moment. And it took hold of me. I was literally a raging alcoholic at 12 years old. Not because of some moral failing, but because I had the disease of addiction that took over, shut down my prefrontals. And for anyone listening that isn't brain savvy, that's where our choices are made. That's where we live, right? When we go into our closet and we decide what we want to wear for the day, or we decide, oh, I'm going to stop at this four-way and let somebody else go first, right? And our moral compass is in our prefrontals. That was literally shut down by the disease of addiction in my midbrain that was responsible for survival alone, ran the show. And I think if people could understand that the addicted population lives there, right? They're not choosing to shut off the good moral compass of their brain. They're not choosing to live for the next 5 seconds. They don't have a choice over that. When someone eats a peanut, they don't go, oh, gee, I'm going to have this peanut close my throat off and kill me. No, they can't control what happens once that peanut gets in their mouth. And the same is true for the addicted population. Okay. And again, there's that choice in the first use, almost always. Now, I've worked with the horror stories of the 8-year-old whose mom passed him over, a pill and said, hey, sweetie, try this. Okay. Not really the 8-year-old's choice at that point. But for most people with addiction, they didn't know any better. They didn't know that they had an allergy to alcohol. They didn't know that the minute they put something in their body, that this literal entity would take over their life and their brain. And even when they're in the throes of addiction, they don't even know that they have a loss of control, right? Which is why it's so hard to help people with the disease of addiction. Because if I say to you, Felix, hey, dude, you got a problem here, right? You're smoking crack before, you start your day every day. It's defense, it's anger, it's met with rage and excuses, because that's what the disease of addiction needs to continue doing what it's doing, which is driving you to the ultimate goal of any disease, which is death. And so the takeaway for me when I learned about the disease of addiction was that these people are sick. They are not choosing this. Okay. It looks like they're picking up the drink and they're putting it to their lips like a choice. But if they really had a choice, they wouldn't. They would rather not pick up that drug or that drink or the gambling or the sex or the whatever it is they're addicted to. They want a normal life. They just don't know how to have it.
Yeah. I was reading I'm still reading. It's a thick tome, The Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist. And it really talks about the difference between the left brain and the right brain. But one of the interesting tidbits, and this was really glanced over, so the book really didn't go into any detail in this section at least, was the inhibitory signal you should normally get from alcohol and drugs. But in people who are addicted to these substances, that inhibitory signal is missing. And if anything, it could be a positive feedback loop instead of a negative feedback loop. And so it is, like you said, coming from the genetics, it really is a brain disease, a brain dysfunction,
Correct.
where the normal inhibitory signal to say, "Oh, I've had enough, I need to stop," doesn't exist. And as a matter of fact, the opposite may be true, where that actually gets amplified, and you crave more instead of your body shutting down and saying you need less. And really, the only way around that is to become consciously aware of that and consciously make different decisions, which is so hard to do when your subconscious drives so much of our thinking and our actions. And it's an incredibly difficult work to work with. I'm sure that was your experience to deal with these people, where sometimes you just cannot reason with them. You cannot use logic with them, because there's so much in the subconscious that drives something that us, conscious human beings, let's say, have no control over.
Yeah. And I mean, you're talking to the midbrain, Felix. You're talking to the animalistic survival brain when you're talking to someone in the throes of their addiction. You're not going to tell a snake to not eat that rat. You're just not, right? The snake wants the rat. Everything in its body, in its brain tells it needs to eat that rat to survive. And the way that I have found, because a lot of people have asked me, how do you go from addiction therapist to executive, leadership coach, right? Like, what the hell is the connection between this? Are you trying to say that every founder or CEO is addicted? No. Could they be? That's for another conversation. But the way that addiction works is that it is fueled by stress. The addicted brain's ability to cope with stress is broken, and it's through that inhibitory dopamine system, all of those kind of things, okay? And so when I was working with the addicted population, did I say to them, okay, Felix, don't use today? And they say, okay, Cassie. No, that is not how this works. Anyone that has ever known someone addicted, you don't just tell them to stop. Okay. If that was the case, no one would use because everyone is constantly telling the addicted population to stop. It feeds on stress. The ability for an addicted person to handle stress is nil. Okay. They have no internal coping skills. They don't know literally the basics of pausing, of taking a breath, of taking a walk. Any positive, healthy coping skill is totally outside of their knowledge. And then there's the external stresses, right? The fact that they have no idea how to hold a conversation with someone. They have no idea how to not be aggressive. They, to say they were assertive, they're like, I am assertive. Like, whoa, case in point. They don't know how to be humble or admit that they were wrong. They don't know how to resolve conflict. If anything, they are the cause of conflict unknowingly. They don't know how to trust people. They don't know how to set boundaries, healthy boundaries that keep them and the people around them safe. And the lack of all of those things causes them undue, unnecessary stress that feeds their use. So, really, when I was an addictions therapist, I was a stress buster. I had to help that person across from me reduce the stress that they experienced externally by teaching them how to communicate, how to handle that conversation when their mom called them demanding the money that they stole from them or whatever the scenario was. I had to help teach them how to admit that they were wrong, to be humble enough to tell their grown children, I need help, to teach them how to set those boundaries and say, no, I'm sorry. You can't take from me. I won't keep giving, giving, giving. And also that internal, how to manage the stress that you can't, teach away, right? There's stress in everyone's lives, regardless of those soft skills, regardless of your ability to communicate or trust or delegate and all of those things. And so that's exactly what I do with the founder CEOs, right? I help them manage the stress that they experience. There's natural stresses in a tech startup that you can't, soft skill away, that you just have to be able to cope with. But then there's all of those stresses that as a leader and as someone in that position, they need to possess the ability to clearly communicate, to set boundaries, to set expectations for their team in a realistic, clear way that those expectations can be met and then their business can be driven forward, and also reducing their stress because things are happening in hopefully a way that they should be. So my approach with leadership coaching is very, very similar to my approach with the addicted population.
Yeah, you bridged that gap beautifully, and that's exactly what was where I was trying to get at with this whole conversation is the mindset work is very similar in both populations, even though to an outsider you might not see the difference. But like you said, the external stressors on these startup founders is immense, and to some degrees, some people are addicted to that entrepreneurship. They're chasing that high of the, of the successful ventures that they get. It can be very similar to an addiction. And so I could definitely see how your work previously influences and informs everything you do nowadays. I think that that gap is very easily bridged. Now, I think there's another component though with startups, with startup founders, and I know we talked about this briefly before too. Was you know uh, uh, these startups are have an incredible technical know-how on how to solve a given problem. right? They come up with a solution for a given problem. But what they frequently lack as a result is the leadership know-how on how to actually implement that and get their team to success. So, do you do any leadership development then in that space as well, or is it really just focused more on the individual and dealing with the stress of starting a startup?
No, definitely the leadership aspect as well, because when we think of what is a good leader, we think of somebody with empathy and, the ability to meet, their team where they're at, and guide them with them on this journey, and empower and get their team to be as passionate about it as them, which, I mean, nobody's going to be as passionate as the founder, of course, but really learning how to lead in a way that makes you an actual leader, not just someone with the title. Right? You can be a leader without the title. It's about having people buy in to you because they trust you. You're vulnerable, you're human, you care about them, and you take them on that journey with you. And the right leader with the right group of people that will go to the ends of the world for them, that's unstoppable.
Yeah, that's the the yeah, no, the way I always say that is authority is earned, leadership is learned. So authority comes with a title, right? You're the president of this, vice president of that, manager of this. But that doesn't mean that you're a leader. A leader, the skills that you really need for leadership are something that each and every one of us can learn, and that does not come with a title necessarily, like you mentioned. So that's I think a very important distinction. I'm glad you make that as well. So what does that look like? How long do you normally work with your clients, and what does that look like? You do a lot of one on one. Do you do some group sessions? Like somebody working with you. What does that actually look like?
Yeah. So I work with people for a minimum of 6 months because anything less is really just kind of laughable in the, thought that you're going to make substantial permanent changes in less time than that. Um, and we start out with a 360. I have them do a self-assessment of where they feel that they land on a slew of leadership qualities. And then their team assesses them on those exact same qualities. And we take a look at, okay, where is there alignment? Where is there a gap? Okay, you think you're super approachable, but your team says they don't want to touch you with a 10-foot pole. And really bridging that gap and saying, okay, here's where there's differences. Here's where there's some weaknesses. Where do you want to focus first, right? What's most important for you? To gain the trust of your team, to build emotional intelligence, to learn how to be vulnerable, to be more approachable. And we come up with a essentially a treatment plan like I did when I was a therapist. We identify what are those few skills, top skills that you want to work on, and how much time more or less do we want to devote to them. And of course that's completely subjective and open to change as time goes on. We might say, okay, let's spend the first 2 or 3 months really focusing on what it can be like for you to build trust with your team. And depending on the situation, if they've lost their trust because of a scenario, that can be the full-time job that we're really working on, how to get that trust back. Or, to be approachable, right? All of these skills are not something that you can just say to someone, okay, smile and nod and it will happen. It's a lot of internal work. It's a lot of homework assignments, as I call them. Okay, Felix, for the next, week before we meet again, here's what I need you to try to do every single day. Here's the action that I want you to take on a daily basis. And sometimes that's an internal thing of, a journal about, feelings on around certain things after certain meetings or interactions with people. Sometimes that's literally telling every person that you internally meet with that day, that week, hey, my coach is having me work on da 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 da. How do you think, this is coming? Or what's an area you think that you've noticed could be improved in this realm, to get feedback for the week so that they hear that from their reports, because I have learned, and it was something, of course, that I learned as an addictions therapist, that there's a reason group therapy is the preferred modality for addiction. Because, Felix, if you're addicted and I tell you, hey, Felix, you have a problem, it's really easy to dismiss me, right? I'm the expert. I'm paid to tell you this. You're forced to see me, whatever. I'm one human. But if we're in a group setting, and I say to you, Felix, I'm really loving this purple tail you got today, you're going to think I'm nuts. But then the other group members start talking about, ooh, it does look really soft. And do you dye that tail purple? That's really, can I touch it? Now, you still think the rest of us are shit crazy for talking about your tail, but you just might pause and peek over your shoulder to see if you have a tail, right? You don't believe it, but you're going to look anyway. And so the more people that can reinforce that there's a gap, that there's a need for improvement, the more likely someone is to actually take strides to make that change. So I really try to encompass and embody the team's input around the coaching, because one touch point of a 360 at the beginning and 6 months later, that's not giving them the continual feedback that they need and the insights that are golden, right? I don't know their team intimately. They think they know their team intimately, likely, but to really have the team involved helps. One, it helps the team build trust. They're like, dude, this CEO's like in it, right? They're not just talking the talk, they're really walking the walk. So they've automatically built trust and credibility. And say that one more time.
Are there ever times after the 6 months somebody comes to you and says, "This was awesome. I want to keep working with you." Do you ever extend it beyond those 6 months, or is it really just focus on those first 6 months to get someone going?
Absolutely. Nope, absolutely. I just have the minimum of 6 months. And I like to do the 360s at those 6-month increments to make sure that I'm doing what I say I'm doing, right? And that we are moving the needle and making progress and those kind of things. Because when it comes to leadership, right, how do you put that on paper? It's not like, you've got a quota and you can see, okay, we're at 50% of, quota attainment this quarter. So for me, having those 360s and those touch points with the team members is kind of that thermostat or thermometer around, how are we doing? How are you as the CEO doing in this progress?
So, who are your ideal clients? Who should reach out to you? I mean, what kind of problems do they have that uh, you can help them solve?
I mean, really any leader. My ideal, like I said, is an early stage tech founder CEO, only because I'm pretty intimately aware of the dynamics and the things at play in their world, internally and externally. But I can help them connect with their team. I often hear the question, how do I even connect with my team? Instead of being seen as like the CEO up here, how do they kind of be seen not as an equal, but as a peer that it can be collaborated with instead of reporting to? So there's always that connection piece. I find that trust is a big one. A lot of tech leaders say, I can't get my team to trust me. And they have a complete lack of understanding where that lack of trust comes from. They just can feel that it's there. And ironically, or kind of counterintuitively, their team not meeting expectations, even if that's around, KPIs and different things, because oftentimes, I mean, people in general want to meet other people's expectations, right? I don't know many people, especially the hundreds that I've met in the tech space, that just are like, "Nah, I don't really care about, doing my job well." So the problem that I find usually is what exists is that the expectations given to them either just weren't clear, they weren't realistic, they didn't understand them. They thought they were doing what they were being asked, but it turns out they were like talking about two different things. And so even having, if you're a founder CEO that's like, why is my team missing the mark in what I'm asking for them? Why am I always frustrated when things aren't being delivered when I want them or how I want them? Why aren't people listening to me? What is going on? And that kind of communication frustration, I love to dive into that with them and really break down what usually is a very simple simple change that can make an exponential change in deliverables and their ability, the team's ability to meet those expectations.
Yeah. This definitely resonates with me. I think, coming from the healthcare background, the number one cause for any big problems that are associated with healthcare is always communication, has been so for decades. And despite all the technology, we have not broken through that, right? It's simple human communication. And from everything you said, I came up with these leadership KPIs, right? Everybody talks about KPIs, key performance indicators, but in my mind, the leadership KPIs are that the people under your charge should know what their role is, what their job is, what it is that they're supposed to be doing. If they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, then you're doing a poor job at communicating that to them. The P is they should be proud of what they're doing, right? If they're just doing mundane data entry jobs and they're not proud of what they're doing, well, then they're not going to be doing a good job. But if they're really proud of the work that they're doing, the stuff that they're creating, they're going to be doing a better job. And they're actually going to create quality outputs. So they have to be proud of what it is that they're doing. And the I stands for, do they feel like they're an integral part of your mission? Because if they don't feel included, if they don't feel part of your mission, if they feel disconnected from it all, well, then A, they probably don't know what it is that they're supposed to be doing. And B, they certainly are not going to be proud of the work that they're going to be doing. So to be a good leader requires you to follow those KPIs. And it goes very much in line with everything that you said. The interesting thing though that I have definitely come to find with working with startups myself, I'm working through a startup incubator in Cincinnati, is a lot of times the funding is missing, or people don't realize that they have a problem that they want to throw money in, right in this space. People can easily see, oh, I need a fractional CFO to fill that space. I need a web designer. I need a data analyst. Those are sort of these hard things that people can easily justify the expense for, but it's more difficult to justify the expense of a coach, even though a good coach, a good executive coach, a good leadership coach, a good business coach can make or break, especially in the startup world, your business. So, how do you break through to that?
I I guess one of my superpowers working with the addicted population is was always helping people see the impact of a problem that they didn't think they had. And with founders, right? I can't convince someone that they're a poor communicator. I can't convince someone that they are aggressive versus assertive. I can't convince someone of anything, but I can show them the impacts that are a result of that they can't necessarily deny. Right? I can show them, well, gee, let's just look completely objectively about how many people in your leadership team have come to you to seek out advice or guidance in the last 14 days. If that answer is 0, we've got a problem. They should be coming to you in some capacity. You're either not approachable, they don't care what you have to say, they don't like you, they don't trust you. There is some reason why you as the CEO in a small business like that, okay, we're not talking a 10,000 company business. When you've got 30 to 50 people, the CEO is still and should be an integral part of that. So when I ask objective questions like that, how many times has, right? They can go, oh, none. Right? I just leave that. Okay, so when we look at, the last ask that you made of da 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 da, did they meet those expectations for you? Well, no, da da da. Oh, okay. Well, what about the person before that? Right? And so if you circle the pond, then they can see that the pond is there. And I find that approach much more successful than trying to convince someone there is a pond.
Yeah, the other side of that I was just thinking of, and I think you posted about this on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, is it's not even just about have you received no feedback. It's if the feedback you get is only positive. Everybody says, "Yay, you're doing a good job. Let's keep going. This is awesome." Right? If you only receive positive feedback, that's a problem too, because then everybody's being dishonest as well, because nothing in life is ever that perfect, right? And I can even say that from my own personal experience, like the positive feedback I've received over the years has always been, it makes me feel better in the moment, but it doesn't actually help me because I don't know my blind spots. I don't know what I could be doing better. Right? All this stuff where I'm falling short. I'm not aware of. I'm not aware of it myself, and clearly, no one is willing to speak up to that either. Which means I can't get any better, and the problems persist. And if the problem persists over time, it's just going to get exponentially worse. So, for people to have some kind of open communication, trustworthy communication, and be able to have that honest communication is so key. And be able to receive negative or what you perceive as negative feedback, right? I mean, it might just be again blind spots that you should be aware of, that your company needs to be aware of in order to grow, in order to improve themselves and become better. That is so important as well. So, that's
Absolutely.
awesome. So let's get out of the business side of things here for a second. Let's have a little bit more fun. So I want to ask you some questions out of my simple networking
Sure.
tool networking book, just to get a little bit more color on who Cassie is. Obviously, you've been around the block a few times. What's a place you haven't been to yet but really want to visit?
Europe.
Any any place in particular in Europe? It's like saying the country of Africa.
Well, but I've never, I mean, other than a pizza joint in Quebec, right across the border, I've never been out of the country. And as an architecture lover, I've always wanted to just backpack through Europe and go see like architecture site to architecture site to architecture site.
Yeah, I mean, the architecture is absolutely astonishing. I grew up in Germany, so I can speak for that. I mean, to look at buildings that are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old and they're still
I
standing,
know.
is absolutely mind blowing. And then to walk through those buildings and try to envision the people that were living in those spaces without any of the modern conveniences that we have, right? I mean, you could throw in like the most biggest television or projector in one of those spaces and have a wonderful party and a movie or something. They didn't do that, right? They had dances or feasts or something. It's just it's truly fascinating. So I love that. Um, who or what is your source of inspiration?
Two people come to mind, and the world doesn't really know either. One is my mother. She is the epitome of resilient and content. And with that resiliency and contentment breeds an unfathomable amount of happiness in her life. And the other is my past supervisor, Shar, that I mentioned earlier. And her absolute passion, drive, and undying love for the addicted population and just helping people through speaking the truth and being that mirror for people and not wavering on it regardless of the hardships or resistance that she is met with.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I think even just listening to you, derive some indirect source of inspiration from that person, because that is by far a difficult and challenging problem to solve. And for her to pour her heart and soul into that, that is inspirational. Now I know you have dogs, but this is the weirdest question I've ever asked, and that's why it's also one of my favorite ones. Would you rather have a cat that barks or a dog that meows?
I'm still taking the dog. Still taking the dog.
I kind of figured you would say that, just because I know you're a dog person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I could have a dog that purred, that would be amazing. I do love the purr of a cat, and just the physical manifestation of their joy is like a dog wagging their tail, right? But you can feel it when they're laying on you.
No, that's true. That's definitely that's I mean, that's why therapy dogs exist, right? I mean, there's definitely some deeper connection there. All right, the last segment here is there's this common theme where every guest gets to ask the next guest the question, not knowing who that person is. So Hallie Avolia would like to know, if you could eat dinner with any person, dead or alive, who would that be?
My grandfather, who passed away a few years ago, I would take the opportunity to thank him for always being a strong figure in my life and showing me the value of hard work and just being true to himself. And I would love to fill him in on the last 5 years of my life and see the pride in his face, because I know he would be so proud. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's I could definitely relate to that. When I was asked that question not too long ago myself, I also said my grandfather, um, uh, for the simple reason that he was always talked highly about. Everybody always spoke very positively about him, how successful he was, and how just awesome as a human being he was. But he died about a year before I was born, so I actually never got a chance to meet him in person. So yeah, I would love to have that conversation with him as well about his life, my life, and all the stuff we never had a chance to talk about. So, no, thank.
I didn't know I was gonna be crying at
You
9
know,
AM,
I'm
Felix.
sorry. I definitely did not want to stir up that many emotions, but I do appreciate your vulnerability there, and it definitely, I could tell you that definitely hits home for me as well. So I appreciate that. But you know, here's your opportunity now, though, to ask the next guest a question and maybe make them cry as well.
I actually, every night, I ask my youngest daughter a form of this question. If you could relive your life and make one change that you had control over, what would that change be?
That's a great one. I love that. I might have to ask my kids those questions too. That's a good question. That's awesome. I love
So
that.
I ask my daughter each day, each night before bed, the best part of her day, like what was kind of the highlight of her day, and then what was one thing about her day that she would change again, that she has power over, not just like, and it's usually I wouldn't have yelled at you this, or I would have stayed longer at my friend's that, or, but sometimes it can be pretty deep when she realizes, and it helps her differentiate what does she have control over or not, so that when she goes into tomorrow, she has greater awareness of what she has control over.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I love that, because at the end of the day, you know, we've heard this all before. Control the controllables, right? And it really the only controllable. If you really think about it, controllables in that statement is kind of misleading, because it's not plural. There's only one thing we truly have control over, and that's ourselves. And so, when you talk about controlling the controllables, it's really
Yes.
only talking about you yourself. And so, we had that discussion at dinner last night actually too. And if you're trying to change other people, you can't. The only person you could change is yourself. So if you want other people to change, you yourself have to change first. And so I love that. I think that's spot on. That's beautiful. So listen, if anybody wants to reach out to you, if everyone wants to connect with you, if everyone wants to talk about your coaching services, where can they reach out? Where can they find you?
So I love to hang out on LinkedIn. That I don't have any other social media, so don't try to find me anywhere else. But shoot me a DM. You're welcome to send me an email at hello@execcoachingsolutions.com, but that can be a mouthful. So just Cassie Adkins on LinkedIn, and
That's perfect.
you
I'll
know,
make sure that link is in the description below for anybody to find that easily and readily to connect with you and chat with you and figure out what you can do to help them out. Cassie, thank you for this wonderful conversation. Any last words from you to the world?
I actually just said this to my daughter the other day. Be the change. Go out and do today what you wish the rest of the world would do as well.
Yeah, it goes back to controlling the controllables, right? Controlling yourself. And if you want to see change in the world, you yourself have to be the one to change first. So I love it. That's perfect. Let's just end it right here. Thank you again for doing this. This was awesome. I mean, we touched so many subjects emotionally as well, right?
All right. Thank you so much, Felix.
All right. I really hope you enjoyed that. The questions that I asked towards the end are from my new book, The Simple Networking Tool. It's a great book that redefines how we network. It's all about who someone is and not what they are. So if you want to get your own book, it's available on Amazon. If you want to learn more, there's videos about it here on YouTube. So you can check out this amazing new social science experiment. I'm so excited for it. If you do get a book and you do start your own, please let me know how it goes and what your experience is like. I'm working on the second edition and I want to make it the best one yet. So be sure to tag me, let me know how it goes. Thanks for watching.